Thank you. No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. The floor is yours, dude.
Okay.
Okay.
I have one strong leg, my right leg, so I stand for hours every day on this leg. I consider it a great honor to address you all today on the subject of Darwinism and white supremacy. This is not only because Glendale Community College and its students are very dear to my heart, but also because most of you have an innate appreciation for cultural and ethnic diversity. This is partly due to your diverse student population of 11% Asian, 25% or 23% Hispanic, 2% Black, and 52% predominantly Armenian, and some scattering of Anglo-American. Indeed, this is why we celebrate cultural events here on the campus, such as Newroz, Martin Luther King's birthday, Cinco de Mayo, a Filipino fiesta, Chinese New Year, and of course the commemoration of the Armenian genocide. I myself am a bit of a mixed breed, having ancestors from Central Europe, Scandinavia, Scotland, and Mexico. That's why I have a tan. But sadly, even though we celebrate our diversity at GCC, there are some people in America and Northern Europe who do not. The reason why they don't is because they believe in the concept of white supremacy. Let me give you a few recent examples. On June 17, 2015, a white supremacist named Dylan Roof opened fire on members of the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, killing 9 people. On August 11, 2017, neo-Nazis, alt-right, white supremacists gathered in Charlottesville, Virginia, to protest the removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee, who was the commander of the Confederate States Army during the Civil War from the South. After the rally, a white supremacist drove his car into a crowd of protesters, killing one woman named Heather Heyer and injuring others. In fact, 19 others. On January 11, 2018, this is just a few months ago, the University College London began investigating a eugenics conference that took place on their own campus. This is a conference on why whites are superior, right? According to The Guardian meaning that famous newspaper in UK, the London Conference on Intelligence, do I have that? No. The London Conference on Intelligence was said to have been run secretly for at least 3 years by James Thompson, an honorary senior lecturer at the university, including contributions from a researcher who had previously advocated child rape. This is going on in London, one of our best universities. It is rather, to me at least, mind-boggling to think that after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation back in 1860s, after the impact of Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, after we recently elected our first African-American president, after our cities and schools have become more international and diverse than ever before in history, that today we still find ourselves enmeshed by those who hold to the doctrine of white supremacy. There are no doubt many reasons for this phenomenon, but today I would like to highlight one of them, namely the impact of Darwinism. And let me say at the outset of my presentation that although I am critical of Darwinism, I am not questioning any scientific evidence of the evolutionary process, nor do I question the age of the universe being 5 billion years or more, nor am I one who claims to be steeped in the biological sciences. Rather, my critique of Darwinism stems from its claim that the entire world and all the people in it are here without a creator, and not the result of some intelligent design. That everything you see exists through the random biological process of life without any spiritual realm or meaning. It is this single doctrine of evolution, that there is no God in the heavens, that we have no accountability to a supreme being, and that as physical human beings we are essentially a piece of protoplasm waiting to become manure. It is this doctrine I am critical of. So I'd like to begin by examining an event in Charles Darwin's life. He lived from 1809 to 1882, In December of 1832, when Darwin was 23 years old, he arrived on the southernmost tip of South America on the HMS Beagle to drop off a few indigenous Indians who had spent a year or so in England before being returned by the ship's captain, Fitzroy. They were called the Yagan Indians, but he called them the Fuegians because it was after the Tierra del Fuego. When Darwin first saw these Native Americans on the seashore, he was shocked at their primitive behavior, and he wrote the following in his diary. He says, quote, "There can hardly be a doubt that we are descended from barbarians. The astonishment which I felt on the first seeing a party of the Fuegians on a wild and broken shore will never be forgotten by me. For the reflection at once rushed into my mind, such were our ancestors. These men were absolutely naked. They were bedaubed with paint. Their long hair was tangled. Their mouths frothed with excitement. And their expression was wild, startled, and distrustful." If someone has a cup of water, that'd be good. Help me out. A little bottle of water or something. "They possessed hardly any arts, and like wild animals, they lived on what they could catch, only what they could catch. They had no government, and they were Oh, thank you. Wow, a whole bottle. Smart water. Thank you very much. Oh, wait, can you open that for me? I can't see. They were merciless to everyone who was not of their own tribe." And then he says this. Okay, so can I read? What? Perfect. Thank you so much, sir. "I would as soon," he said, be descended from that heroic little monkey or from that old baboon as from a savage who delights to torture his enemies, offers up bloody sacrifices, practices infanticide without remorse, treats his wives like slaves, knows no decency, and he is haunted by the grossest of superstitions." End quote. Seeing these men from an undeveloped tribe on earth, Darwin felt no compassion, only disdain. And yet, interestingly, 34 years later, a Christian linguist named Thomas Bridges moved to that region with his family. Here's Charles Darwin and Thomas Bridges. He moved to that region with his family and learned the Yagan Indian language. Years later, this man, Thomas Bridges' son, Lucas Bridges, wrote about his father's experience, and he contrasted it with Darwin, saying that the belief that the Fuegians, or these Yagan Indians, were cannibals was not the only mistake that Charles Darwin made about them. Lucas says, listening to their speech, Darwin got the impression that they were repeating the same phrases over and over again, like bada 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 bada. And therefore, he came to the conclusion that something like 100 words would cover their whole language. We who learned as children to speak Yagan, remember Lucas grew up there, knew that even within its lone limitation, it is infinitely richer and more expressive than English or Spanish. And my father's Yagan English dictionary contains no fewer than 32,000 words. Why do you suppose that these two men viewed the Yagan Indians so differently? The answer comes when you examine their two worldviews. Here's a picture, a photograph of the Yagan Indians. According to Darwin, all living things on this planet can be divided into two kingdoms, the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. That's it. Man fits in the animal kingdom. He says man does not have his own kingdom. He's part of the animal kingdom. He's just an animal. He's an intelligent one, but only an animal. Man, Homo sapien, does not have his own kingdom. He simply evolved through the random natural forces into the most intelligent of animals. Furthermore, within his own species, there is inequality, so that a man's value is based on his strength or intelligence, that is, his genetic advancement on the evolutionary scale, and not from any intrinsic value. Thomas Bridges, however, viewed the world as living things in three divisions: the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and separately, the kingdom of man. In his understanding, man was created with intrinsic value, regardless of strength or intelligence. So let us examine these two worldviews represented by Darwin and Bridges. According to Darwin, man evolved as the highest animal. According to Moses or Bridges, man was created in the image of God. That is, he bears his image. There's something sacred about him, something different from all the animals, something that makes him much more valuable than all the animals. According to Darwin, there's monism. That means that you only have a material body. There is no soul or spirit inside you. There's no separate kind of person inside you that's going to live forever. But according to Moses and according to Bridges, there's dualism. We have a material body, but then we have an inner soul. According to Darwin, there's determinism. This is a big one, okay? According to Moses, it's free will. In other words, if you see a woman who some emergency comes up and she has her child there and she wants to make sure her child lives, and not even if she has to sacrifice her own life, if she sacrifices her for that child, we would say that woman was a tremendous woman for her to give up her life for her child. Darwin would say, no, she's not. That's just her instinct. Well, we would say, wait a minute, that's a good character. No, there is no such thing as good or bad character. It's just what your instincts do. You're just predetermined. You're just having chemical processes that happen in your brain that tell you, oh, right now you're supposed to do this. This is how you're supposed to act. Determinism. Whereas free will says, no, people can decide what they're going to do. And some people are bad. They make bad decisions and they do harm to people. Other people do good things. According to Darwin, a person has functional value based on what they can do, what they're capable of, how strong they are, what they can contribute to society. According to Moses, he has intrinsic value. It doesn't matter what their abilities are. If they're handicapped, if they're strong, if they're a celebrity, whatever. If they're a student at GCC, or if they're a student at Harvard. That person has intrinsic value. The same value, in fact. According to Darwin, men and women are born unequal. Only the strong have rights. According to Moses, we are born equal with innate human rights. According to Darwin, there's moral relativism, morality, laws. All these things are temporary things just for us to try to make sense of society. According to Moses, no, there's a moral objectification. There's a morality in every person's heart. Even if they don't have access to the commands of Moses, they still know it's wrong to kill, it's wrong to steal, it's wrong to lie, it's wrong to hurt people. According to Darwin, human life is actually disposable. According to Moses, it is sacred. And it is wrong to take human life. Here we have a quote from Darwin in The Descent of Man. At some future period, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate. Yes, he did use the word exterminate. And replace the savage races throughout the world. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider, for it will intervene between a man in a more civilized state than even the Caucasian, if you can imagine that, and some ape as low as a baboon, instead of now between the Negro and the gorilla. Right? Baboon, gorilla, Negro, Caucasian. In the U.S. Declaration of Independence, they hold the Mosaic view, Moses view, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What do you think? He thought these middle two were going to die off, right? And then there would be a bigger chasm between the Caucasian, or something even better than the Caucasian, and the baboon. Since these two worldviews differ dramatically from one another, it should not surprise us that they coincide with two different views concerning the origin of man. Darwinism espouses the out-of-Africa model of man's origin, whereas the biblical view espouses the Mesopotamia model or maybe more accurately, Eastern Anatolia model. The out of Africa model, as we saw from the Descent of Man, Darwin believed that we evolved slowly over millions of years in Africa, beginning with the baboon, then evolving to the gorilla, then the Negro, and finally the Caucasian. And according to this theory, the Negro would eventually die out and be exterminated by stronger human tribes. And this would allow the Caucasian to carry the human species into the future, since Darwin considered their genes to be stronger and more developed. Hence, Darwin believed in white supremacy. The rest of mankind, especially in Africa and Australia, were not much higher than the primates. In his chapter entitled Comparison of the Mental Powers of Man and the Lower Animals, he says this: no animal is self-conscious, that he reflects on such points as from where he comes, or from where he will go, or what is life and death, and so forth. How little can a hard-worked wife of a degraded Australian savage, who uses very few abstract words and cannot count above 4, exert her self-consciousness or reflect on the nature of her own existence? He considered that woman to be a little more than an animal. Now, obviously, the blatant racism of Darwin is not shared by most scientists in our generation. I'm not saying that today's evolutionists are racist. Don't misunderstand me. What I'm saying is that today's racists fully embrace Darwinism. That's my point. You'll have evolutionists here on campus that are not racist. Don't quote me wrong here. I'm not accusing them at all. I'm just saying that racists today love Darwin. And the racists today are more prevalent than you might realize. Consider National Geographic. In their most recent issue entitled Black and White, the editors have an entire article there apologizing for their previous racism and admitting things like, they said this right here, I just took it from a couple weeks ago about the magazine. In a full issue article on Australia that ran in 1916, the Aboriginal Australians were called savages, just like guess who else? Who ranked lowest in intelligence of all human beings. And that's the photograph they had of them. Sadly, their racist views, that of National Geographic, did not diminish with the advent of civil rights in the US. As late as 2006, what is that? Just 12 years ago. This magazine endorsed the view that certain African tribes represent a more primitive language and intelligence. It was called The Greatest Journey, 2006, March, I think it is. And this is the quote. They said, ancestral DNA markers turn up most often among the San people of the southern Africa and the Biaka Pygmies of Central Africa, as well as in some East African tribes. The San and the two of the East African tribes also speak languages that feature a repertoire of unique sounds, including clicks. Like that, wait. I need some more water. I have a friend who lived in that area, and she learned some of the Bushman language, and she'd say a word like now. Like you say the word now, but only you add a click to it. I go, wow, where did you get that? And she goes, that's from the Bushman language. And then they go on to say in this article, perhaps these far-flung people pay witness to an expansion of our earliest ancestors within Africa, like the fading ripples from a pebble dropped in a pond. Some archaeologists think that the migration out of Africa, when they got out of Africa, right? That marked a revolution in behavior that also included more sophisticated tools, wider social networks, and the first art and body ornaments. Perhaps some kind of neurological mutation had led to spoken language. Notice that now it's spoken language. Back in the Bushman, the Khoisan language is not spoken, it's clicks, right? According to them. And it made our ancestors fully modern, setting a small band of them on course to colonize the world. Oh my goodness. When National Geographic maintains that the African Bushmen and the Pygmy tribes are far-flung people, similar to our earliest ancestors, and that man's exit from Africa was accompanied by a revolution in behavior, more sophisticated tools, a neurological mutation which led to spoken language, right, and made our ancestors fully human, then we need to acknowledge that racism is still present even among today's leading Darwinists. I get the impression that Jim Shreve, who wrote this article, had never studied the Khoisan language. In essence, he made the same conclusion Darwin did when he heard the Yagan language, thinking that it was so primitive that maybe it was only a couple hundred words of vocabulary and so forth. But the Khoisan language is just as sophisticated as French or Arabic or Cantonese. Maybe in his mind he was thinking we went from to and finally, merci beaucoup, français chez vous, like real language. But it is sophisticated just like Cantonese. Cantonese contains 6 to 9 different tones to help distinguish the meaning of words. And Khoisan can have up to 15 different clicking sounds to distinguish the meaning of words. And if you look at the Sandawe, that's one of the Khoisan languages, it has a dictionary that is 232 pages long. Thousands upon thousands of words. Okay, let's look at, here's the biblical model or the Mesopotamia model of man's origin. It says that we came from one spot and we were one family, and we all descended from one family recently, not millions of years ago from an ape-like mitochondrial Eve in Central Africa, but perhaps only 5,000 to 10,000 years ago from the region of eastern Anatolia and northern Mesopotamia. According to the Hebrew sacred writings, everyone living today descended from a single family of 8 people. And this is how Moses described it. The sons of Noah, who went forth from the ark, were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. These 3 were the sons of Noah, and from these the people of the whole earth were dispersed. So what are we saying? The MRCA, the most recent common ancestor. By the way, Noah and his wife and the 3 sons and their wives, do I have that in there? Maybe I have it in my other notes in the PDF. I'm not sure. Oh, yeah. The Chinese character for ship is a boat and 8 individuals. So it goes way back to this. They knew the story of Noah. So we look at Mrs. Noah as far as the female, our mother, the common mother that we all share here on earth. It would be the wife of Noah. When Douglas Rode of MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, when he did his research on the most recent common ancestor, the MRCA, he concluded the following. This is what he said, quote, "The MRCA of all present-day humans lived just a few thousand years ago. Not millions of years ago. Just a few thousand years, we all share the same grandma, abuelita, babushka, all your favorite, As far as our female MRCA, that would be Noah's wife. At this point, I would like to illustrate these 2 claims of man's origin with a set of photographs. Natalia Ivanova is an award-winning photographer in Paris, France. And she has made it her ambition to photograph young women from all over the world, showing how beauty is woven into every tribe and nation on earth. So I contacted her and asked her permission to use her photographs for this presentation at Glendale. And she was very gracious. She sent me the stunning portraits of 24 women with high quality images. And if you would like to see her entire collection, you can do so at the following website. So lesorigines-de-la-beauté.com. So let me show you a photograph of a Fulani woman from the heart of Africa. According to Darwin, right, or the Darwinists, they say that our mitochondrial Eve must have come from Central Africa, like this Fulani woman. But when you see her, you can imagine perhaps that the rest of African tribes could have descended from her, but it would be hard to imagine a Chinese person or a European person descending from a woman with these features. Likewise, what about Northern Europe? When we see a British woman, we can't imagine an Asian descendant or an African descendant coming from her, right? Just as unlikely. The same is true for a Chinese woman. We can't imagine a European or African descendant from her. But now let me show you a photograph of a woman from eastern Anatolia, someone whose DNA stems from the foothills of Mount Ararat. She has what I would call the perfect middle features of the earth. That is, you can see that she could be the mother of the Asian. She could be the mother of the African. She could be the mother of the Indo-European. I'm not going to tell you what country she comes from, because if I do, half the audience would get stuck up. I'm just going to say that if she came here to Glendale, she'd fit right in. Okay, so if we were to travel west through Turkey and southern Europe and finally end up in England, this is the progression of facial features that we find. And please note that the placement of these photographs are generalized not to scale, but let me just see them. No, I'm sorry, this is going towards Africa first. Okay, so this is a Saudi woman next to her, okay, Saudi Arabia. Then we see here 2 women from Ethiopia. And then we keep on going west, and we go into Central Africa, and that's what they look like. And in the West Africa, outside on the islands there, they get light again, lighter skinned, and finally in the north in Algeria, this is what she looks like. Okay, if we take the same Middle Eastern woman from Anatolia and go west towards Turkey and then into Europe, the next one would look like this. The next one in Romania looks like that. The next one in France looks like her. The next one in Germany looks like her. And finally in England like that. You see the gradual change? If we start with that same woman again and we go towards India, we end up with someone like her in Bangladesh or someone like her in Sri Lanka, a Tamil woman. If we go, this is most interesting, if we start from Anatolia and we go towards Azerbaijan, into the Georgia and the Caucasus Mountains where there's all these different people groups, this is what we find here. We head towards Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzia, finally Korea, and China. Okay, so putting it all together, this is what we have. Here she is in the middle, Anatolia, going to the northwest and the southeast. That's the Indo-European family. Going towards the Arabian Peninsula and into Africa, that's the African family. And then going up northeast towards Central Asia, she comes all the way to China, and you can see the features of her eyes. And in every one of these cases, you can see the features of everything. Their skin, their eyes, their nose, their lips, everything changes gradually. I can say at this point that one of the problems we've had in America, okay, is that our forefathers came from England, which is the most extreme part of this Indo-European family, right? The British girl's really fair. And then those African people who were brought to our country, they came from West Africa, the most extreme part of Africa. So then when they come to this country and here we are white and black, we're truly white and black. And some people even say, my mom would sometimes say, where did the black people come from? I said, Mom, we all came from the same family. We all started Middle Eastern. We had the same color. We had the same, everything. And of course, then the Asians who come to our country, they come from China and from Korea, and again, from the extreme. So America is this odd place where the people gathered from the extremities of the different continents, not from the middle of them. It shows that in our earliest state, there was no white or black or yellow. There was only Middle Eastern. Everyone had the same color of skin. It's really only when we look at the extreme end of every continent that we see our unique features emerge. And that is why a woman in England looks quite different from a woman in Nigeria or a woman in China. However, if you compared a woman from Western Turkey, from Azerbaijan, and from Saudi Arabia, 3 different regions, right? But they're close to each other, their physical appearance is much more similar. We can see the same window into history when we look at the human languages of today. The Genesis account informs us that in ancient times we all spoke the same language, and we had set up a large government in what is today northern Iraq. Then from that point, mankind was scattered to the ends of the earth, and the languages changed slowly over time in geography until we find ourselves in the 21st century speaking over 5,000 languages and dialects. But I believe we can hear the echo of this process even today. If we were to look at the numbers 1 through 10 in various languages within the Indo-European family, we can immediately identify their affinity with each other. Let's start with Kurmanji. I don't know Armenian, but I know Kurmanji because I lived in Diyarbakir on the Tigris River, and that's where the Kurds lived. So They would count 1 to 10, yek, tu, se, chor, ben, shesh, haft, hash, na, da. And some of my students who came from Persia say, oh, hey, that sounds like Farsi. Well, it's Kurmanji. And I even had Indian and Bengali students who said, that sounds like Hindi and Bengalese. Kurmanji. Well, Kurdish is about the closest you get to that area of northern Iraq where it all started. And then we go up to Greek, Romanian, Italian, French, Spanish, Switzerland, and so forth. So, if you take all these numbers, like bench becomes penta, right, in Greek, becomes cinque, becomes cinco, becomes fünf, becomes 5. Or you take shesh, becomes hex, becomes seis, becomes sechs, and then 6. In fact, if we take just the number 6, let's take the number 6 and look what it does. Look at this map. It's just one word in all these different languages, and you can see how they're just spread out. They were the same word. We clearly have an echo into something that happened way back then, and we migrated from one spot, and we all changed our language slowly as we migrated away, right? It wasn't all of a sudden, overnight. And this did not happen only with the Indo-European family. It happens also with the Altaic family. Turkish. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Türkçe konuşan var mı burada? Türkçe konuşan. No, biraz. Çok teşekkürler. You know, he must have learned Azeri. You were from Iran, right? Oh, no, who was it that said? Who knows it? Oh, you're Armenian. Yeah, some Armenians know some Turkish, but anyway. I'm not your enemy, even though I lived in Turkey. Have many Armenian friends. Anyway, so Turkish, I met a man who was living in Urumqi, northwest China, and he came to visit in Western Europe. I saw him there, and I said, you're from Urumqi. Ben Türkçe biliyorum. Sen Türkçe biliyor musun? Anlayabilirim. Evet dedi. We could talk, and he was from northwest China, and we understood each other. All the way, Turkmen, Azeri, Uzbek, Bashkir, Tatar, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Uyghur. Okay, so I'll show you on a micro level how this works. Let's say that you were to take a virtual trip down the Rhine River right here. You see Constance, and you see Mainz in Germany, Rotterdam in Netherlands, and in London. You cross the English Channel. And if you're on a boat as an American tourist and you're trying to talk to the people there, and let's say in Constance, there's this man standing with his family who's trying to communicate with you. And he says to you, Das ist meine Tochter. You would say, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're saying. Sorry. Das ist meine Tochter? So you go down to Mainz on the same boat, on the same river, and there a man with his family stands and he says, Das ist meine Tochter. Das ist meine Tochter. You take it to Rotterdam, he would say, Dat is mein Tochter. Dat is mein Tochter. You cross the English Channel, he says, This is my daughter. This is my daughter. You cross the Atlantic to New Jersey, he says, This is my daughter. This is my daughter. You come to California, he says, This is my daughter, right? Why do you think we have GH written into the word daughter? It's because we used to say Tochter. So, Das ist meine Tochter becomes Das ist meine Tochter becomes Dat ist meine Tochter. This is my daughter. This is my daughter. This is my daughter. Now, do you see my point? When you travel away from North Iraq, any direction you go, the languages change slowly, but it's all the same people group. It shows there's an echo into the past that at one time we all spoke the same language because we were a small group of people. Just one clan, just one family. You can see this online if you want to later on. By the way, I have all the notes here, all the documentation, all the footnotes and everything is on a PDF file, and it'll be available on the www.glendale.edu/cultural-diversity. Thank you, Jiwon. Okay. So if these things are true, that we originally all came from one family, that at one time we all spoke the same language, and that we all had the same color of skin, that means that we are all related to each other, that we all share the same set of grandparents. This worldview has significant ethical implications, right? We cannot treat each other like foreigners or enemies. Rather, we must treat each other like family and like relatives. Ultimately, we should not treat each other or other human beings according to their functional value, like their wealth or their strength or their abilities, but rather according to their lofty position as a member of the great worldwide human family. In this scenario, there can be no caste system, no preferential treatment of certain tribes or nations. There can be no white supremacy, there can be no African supremacy, there can be no Asian supremacy. Only a growing appreciation for the colorful and unique cultural traits of each individual tribe and nation. This also abolishes any supremacy of wealth or education. As our Declaration of Independence claims, all men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Be that a white millionaire, billionaire like Bill Gates, or be that a Latino baby born in East LA. Doesn't matter. They have equal value. Moses' writings reflect this same ethic, which we can see in his command to treat foreigners with respect. He says here, when a foreigner resides among you in your land, you must not, or you do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. You love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Okay, what happens when we come to the ethical implications of Darwinism? As we turn to Darwinism, we encounter a different scenario. In the great evolutionary journey from ape to man, in the great competition for the strongest members of a species to survive and the weaker members to die off, there is one cardinal rule, and that is man is not born equal. A human being's value is not intrinsic. Rather, his value increases with intelligence and strength. It is for this reason that Charles Darwin and those who followed him often referred to superior and inferior groups of human beings. In fact, Francis Galton, Darwin's second cousin, coined the word eugenics. That's the first time we've heard that word from him, from Galton, meaning good birth. Eugenics means good birth, clean birth. In order to encourage governments to decrease the population of inferior humans and increase the population of superior ones, one of Darwin's children, Leonard Darwin, that's a picture of him right there, he served as a chairman of the British Eugenics Society from 1911 to 1928, and he wrote a book in 1929 called What is Eugenics? I think I have the only copy left on eBay. Okay, I looked for it, and sure enough, I found it. I spent the $20, and you can come up here and look at it yourself. Absolutely amazing what he says here. I took photographs of the book to show you this is not just a quote. These are the photos from chapter 7, Inferior Stocks. Okay, what does he say? He quotes here, "It has been said that the future welfare of our nation might be greatly improved by attention now being paid to the breed of the coming generations. This could be done by either making superior stock leave more and inferior stock leave fewer descendants behind them. The methods of dealing with inferior stocks will first be considered. There are two ways of acting when the aim is the production of smaller families by persons of bad stock. And these are persuasion and, if necessary, compulsion. As to the inferior types, we cannot, as we have seen, reduce the number of their descendants by the simple expedient of murder. All that can be done to lessen the size of is to lessen the size of their families." Isn't that a comforting thought, that he would not murder us, but just sterilize us so we don't have children? This is Leonard Darwin. I can imagine him talking with the professor of eugenics in University of Berlin and saying to him, "Heinrich, what shall we do with this miserable, inferior stock of humanity?" "I don't know, we have to find a way to get rid of them from the earth." "Well, we can't exactly reduce the number of their descendants by the simple expedient of murder. All that we can do is sterilize them, choke them out slowly." But how are experiences to be gained if no one is willing to make the first move, right? Who's going to start sterilizing? Watch this. This will blow your mind. Something I had no idea about until I did research for this topic. Case histories offer a glimpse. Does he say it here? Let's see where we... how such experiences should be gained if no one is willing to make a move. Luckily, there is one place in the world, the only one place to which we can look when seeking for practical information in regard to sterilization, and that is the state of California. It's like, what are we doing in here? This is a book written by a British person. in the United States. Oh my goodness, I was blown away. I thought, I'm looking at all this stuff, and sure enough, 1929, when I wrote this book, we had done 5,000 sterilizations in California. Oh my goodness. The Chicago Tribune wrote an article called California Confronts Its Eugenics History. And it says that memos show how California's civic leaders helped popularize eugenics around the world, including Nazi Germany. It gets worse, right? Case histories offer a glimpse of more than the 20,000 people who were, by law, sterilized in state hospitals from 1909 through 1960s in anticipation of curing an array of social ills, from poverty and promiscuity to overcrowded institutions. And if you look at the charts, you know who was sterilized the most? Latinos. Latino women in particular. And looking at one of the, they actually have, I think, I don't know, 30 or 40 of these boxes of files were in Caltech. That's where they were stored after this was all over. This whole saga was done. It was finally finished in 1960, right? They said, oh, I think we made a mistake. We shouldn't sterilize people anymore. Then they looked through the files and they saw all these ones from Latino girls, right? 19, 20, 21, 25. And they would write there IQ 60. Like, oh, IQ 60. You know what they did? They gave her an Anglo IQ test. Of course she's not going to be able to pass that at 100, 120. They ask questions about things that are only, Anglo kids that were raised in a typical Anglo household would be able to answer. In anticipation, okay, so then we go on and to the next. Oh no! Now see this here. This is a publication of the Human Betterment Foundation in Pasadena, California. Look at this. I decided I'm going to go to the building. It says right here the address was 321 Pacific Southwest Building. I went down there, and I've driven by there before. If you go to Pasadena on Colorado Boulevard and Marengo, there's this beautiful building built in 1924 called the Pacific Southwest Bank Building, right? And on the third floor in 321, this is where these people met. This was going on when my mom, right over there, was about 10 years old. During the last 28 years, and they wrote about how good sterilization is for the insane and feeble-minded patients. 10,000. Well, we did 20,000 sterilizations from 1909 to 1960, and then somebody in that Human Betterment Foundation decided to go to Germany and teach the new Nazi party, who had not had the war. No, this is in the 1930s, before they started World War II. They thought Hitler was great, and they taught Hitler's doctors how to sterilize so that the Germans could do it. And of course, they're much more efficient than we are. So as The Guardian they put an article out, Hitler's Debt to America. So C.M. Goethe and E.S. Gosner were part of this Human Betterment Foundation. It had a professor from USC, a professor from UCLA, and 2 professors from UC Berkeley, and the president of Stanford, and all these great minds were part of this group saying we must cleanse our people from all this inferior stock. We have to find a way to sterilize people that shouldn't be here. And so then Goethe goes to Germany to help these doctors, and he writes back E.S. Gosner. He says, you'll be interested to know that your work has played a powerful part in shaping the opinions of the intellectuals behind Hitler in this epoch-making program. Everywhere I sense that their opinions have been tremendously stimulated by American thought, and particularly by the work of the Human Betterment Foundation. I want you, my dear friend, to carry this thought with you for the rest of your life, that you have really jolted into action a great government of 60 million people. Thank you, Human Betterment Foundation, who met in Pasadena. And then the Nazis they proceeded to sterilize at the rate of 5,000 a month until they had sterilized 355,000 Germans. How could this have happened? It was only later that the world learned how far Hitler was to embrace this worldview. Unlike Leonard Darwin, who maintained that the government should not reduce the inferior population, remember the quote, by the simple expedient of murder, Hitler disagreed. In essence, he told himself, ja, warum nicht? Why not? And then proceeded to exterminate the lives of millions of inferior stock, namely the handicapped, gypsies, Poles, and Jews. So to conclude my presentation, I would like to ask the question, is there a place on earth today where racism has not reared its ugly head? A place without hate crimes, where peace reigns, where you are not judged by the color of your skin, where the people treat the world's tribes and nations as one large family? I would say the closest thing we have to a city of justice today is the city of Geneva in Switzerland. Geneva's citizens are unique in this manner that they are concerned for the welfare of the entire world. If you look up their newspaper, Tribune de Genève, you would be amazed at the articles you'll find. It's online. Look it up yourself. It's in English. They report news from every geographic region and from every field of human interest. They truly have a global perspective on life. This is not like CNN. You go on CNN or Fox News or whatever your favorite paper is, what do? You're learning about the Kardashian family. Like just really what we want to know, you know. Geneva is the host city to 22 different international organizations dedicated to the well-being of our planet, not of the country, of our planet, right? The World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the International AIDS Society, the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, the United Nations, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, the Geneva Conventions, right? The humane treatment of POWs, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. All these organizations are interested in all the world, not just for Geneva or for Switzerland or for even Europe. They're just as concerned about what happened with the people getting Ebola in Western Africa as they are in, of course, you know, Europe, the flu in Europe or whatever. The question is, how did Geneva become this advanced in their thinking that prejudice and bigotry are virtually nowhere to be found? If you go back 500 years, you'll discover the answer. From 1536 to 1564, a man named John Calvin spent 28 years of his life in Geneva. He delivered over 2,000 lectures on the Bible, resulting in a city whose leaders were steeped in the biblical worldview of mankind. And in his most famous book, The Institutes of the Christian Religion, Calvin wrote, "All the blessings we enjoy are divine deposits, committed to our trust on this condition that they should be dispensed for the benefit of our neighbors." With this mindset, the city fathers established the first school to educate children. They founded the University of Geneva, which still is there. They began a welfare system for the poor. They built the city's first hospital. Over the years, they welcomed refugees from other lands who were persecuted for their faith. They sent emissaries into other countries to help plant the seeds of the Reformation, including France, Holland, Italy, Hungary, Poland, and even Brazil. Is it any wonder that 500 years later, Geneva should become host to the largest humanitarian agencies in the entire world? I hope you remember that after today, that regardless of where you came from or how much you know, you're a treasured member of the human race. You're not a mere animal. Your life is sacred. You have just as much to contribute to our society as anyone else. I stand before you as a handicapped man, an amputee who's missing a leg, and yet my life is still infinitely valuable. I am not part of an inferior stock. Neither are you. Thank you. Thank you.